Okay, we're going to look at a couple of apples here just because they're here and they're ripe and people like to see apple tasting videos. What we got here is called My Jewel. This is an apple that actually originated in California. It originated in Central California. I don't remember the heritage, the parentage of it, if it's even known. It is supposed to keep very, very well. I have not tried to keep it, so I really don't know about that. I meant to do it this year, but I didn't get around to it, and now they're cracked on the top, and there's only two left. This apple can have a very strong banana flavor. The last one I tried out here did not have it yet. It probably develops more in storage. Some years it's very strong, almost like artificial banana candy. Some people like that, some people don't. Not my favorite flavor. The ones I've tasted this year I was actually able to enjoy and finish. It apparently just keeps really, really well. Again, I haven't kept it, so I don't know. And I think it improves in storage up to an extent, which is not always the case. It's easy to say this apple keeps really well because it doesn't rot, any given apple, but does it taste good? Even if it tastes good, is the texture good? So the ultimate storage apple retains the texture that you want, whatever that is, and also either retains or develops even more flavor in storage, and does that over a very long season. So let's just taste this real quick. This apple has a very fine grain. It's reminiscent of a lot of yellow fleshed apples. There's definitely a banana flavor there. Again, it's not super strong this year, although this one's the strongest one I've tasted. It's probably about medium sweetness. Is the flavor complex? I would not call it complex, but it's pretty good, I guess. I don't know what else to say about it. This is a very rare apple. You can find it if you hunt long enough. You'll find someone that can get it for you, or at a scion exchange in the West Coast or something like that. But it is not a common apple. I'd say it's quite good. It's not exceptional or exciting to me. This apple has quite a few fans. And from the things I remember hearing about it, I would guess that it could be a lot better than this in terms of like its complexity, overall flavor, and stuff like that if it was handled just right, whatever that is for this apple. I mean, that's always a learning curve to figure out what the best time to harvest an apple. Eat it, should you let it ripen on the tree, or should you pick it and then ripen it in storage, and for how long? So I think I have at least two more apples we can try here. Okay, this is an apple that is labeled as Katherine, and I'm not sure if that's really what it is. I haven't taken the time to try to identify it. I'm not sure that would be very easy anyway. If it is Katherine, it's Katherine ETTER, another Albert ETTER apple. Whatever it is, I really like it. So let's taste it. This is an apple that I've talked about quite a bit, but I don't ever recall getting to taste it in a video. In fact, I remember there not being any the year that I did my late apple video. If you want to watch that, it's a very good video for late hanging apples. Pretty unique. It's hard to find information on that, and I've made a point of trying to collect as many as I can get and test them out to see what I can leave on the tree for as long as possible. This is a very nice specimen. There's no cracking. It is probably not ripe yet. I think of this as an apple that is at best eating in December. I mean, granted, December is only a week away, so we'll see. And every year is different. You just don't know. Quality varies. Ripeness dates vary. So let's just give this a try. You can see it has a very white flesh, nice red color. It is not ripe. It's not bad. It's edible. It's actually pretty good. But I would say from what I know about this apple and the flavor right now, we're 2 weeks out, which has put us in about a week or two into December, which is kind of about what I usually remember eating them at their best. If it was to be stored, I'd say you'd pick it now or even earlier. Put it into storage and keep it. I've been meaning, again, to get these picked and put them into storage. Maybe I'll be able to do that today, just to see how they do and how long they'll keep in storage and how they hold their quality. Do they develop in flavor, or do they lose flavor? Do they retain their texture, or does the texture get worse? And speaking of texture, I really like the texture of this apple. It is excellent. It's juicy, but it's light and kind of fine grained, and it just kind of crunches up real well and releases a lot of flavorful juice. And it breaks down really far. It's not like you get a big mouthful of hard fiber that you have to keep chewing and chewing. Not that that's always a bad thing. In fact, it could be very well be a good thing. But I do like the texture of this apple a lot. It reminds me of some of the other ETTER apples, actually, like Pink Parfait and when Rubaiyat is at its best. And there's a very good chance that those apples all have maybe one ancestor in common. What I like about this apple is I like the flavor, although it's mild. It's not an exciting, exotic flavored apple or anything. It's just pleasant. But it has a good sugar acid balance. It has an excellent texture. It hangs for a long time, so it's a late apple. I like that. I like the fact that I can come out here in December, as I have done many, many times, in the snow and frost, and pick one of these and eat it and have it just be outstanding quality. Next step for this apple to me, pick them early, store them, pick them maybe at a few different times, store them, see how they do in storage. I know I have at least one more apple that we can taste that's worth checking out. Here's one I didn't really expect. This is York Imperial. That's what it's labeled as. Again, I haven't identified this really to be sure. You kind of need to like look it up in a book that describes it and look at all these different characteristics to try to get an idea of whether it's really what it says it is. And I haven't done that. It was renowned for keeping for a long time. Now this specimen actually looks like I could store it, so I'm not going to go pick the other one, which is stunted, and we'll taste that. Okay, so here's another little specimen. It's kind of stunted. It might not be, exemplary, but it's something we can taste. So I had 2 apples. It's just a little branch. If this really is a long keeping apple, that's really that outstanding for storage, there's a good chance it won't be at its best until it's actually stored for a little while. Not for sure, but good possibility. But let's just see what it tastes like. Whoa. Well, it's very hard. It's you can probably hear that. It's good. It's good to chew things. The flavor is unexciting, very pedestrian. It tastes like what I would call like an American red apple flavor. This is like a classic apple. I call it appley. It's like got an appley flavor. Not particularly exciting. It's actually pretty sweet though. I would say this is pretty ripe actually. Although I could, especially with this incredibly hard, dense texture, I could see it keeping for a long time. Let's go see what else we can find on Frankentree. Well, in order to get these apples, I'm gonna have to get up in the tree here. We're picking Newton Pippin. Well, here's a Newton Pippin over here that I just got. Here's another one. And we're picking Sierra Beauty. See these little tiny red crab apples? Some of them are kind of shriveled, some are rotten. I'm actually guessing some of them aren't ripe yet, but I'm gonna pick one cluster and we're gonna see how they are just now. There's a few old EGREMONT russets hanging on up here. Well, I have a lot of old non-pareil grafts. I probably have 3 of them on this tree. A Rhode Island greening or 2. So first of all, this is an EGREMONT russet. We tasted this in a video quite a while back. I just left some on the tree. I just want to see what they're like. Damn. But you could just about make syrup out of the juice of this. I'm actually surprised it's so good. Worth keeping the seeds of that. This is Old Non-Pareil. We've tasted this in the late apple tasting video before. I believe it was a little late at the time. Again, cracking problems. It's quite good. It's always a good apple, really. This is a famous English apple. My guess is it does better in England than it does here. I'm not sure how to manage it or handle it, if I should pick it and store it, or it always, it'll hang on the tree for a long time, but I'm not sure that's the best thing to do with it. This is an apple that definitely tends to be small. It's got a rich, pretty unique, interesting flavor, good sugar acid balance, very nice apple. This is Sierra Beauty. It's a famous local apple because there was a small industry growing the apple. I think that's probably because it's well behaved. It was used for dried apples in Anderson Valley, California. It was grown a lot there. It is supposedly a California heirloom, again named Sierra Beauty. It's a nice looking apple. Growers like it. It's well behaved. It keeps well. It's a cooking apple. The flavor is not very interesting. It's okay. I think it's more something that growers are excited about because it does well for them. And there's quite a bit of hype about it as a local heirloom that should be preserved and stuff like that. And that's probably true, but I've never found it very exciting at all. It's kind of watery. It's tart. It doesn't have a lot of flavor. There's not really anything offensive about it. Not very much sugar. Okay, Newton Pippin. Probably a little early to be eating this. This one is a little bit damaged, so it might taste pretty good. It can be good off the tree late, but most people store it. You know, apple Newton Pippin aficionados, I've heard people say that they don't consider it at its best until spring out of storage. I've never really stored it for that long again because I never have my act together. Anyway, let's see what it tastes like. Right now it's quite nice. It's a little on the tart side, but it still is pretty sweet. It's got a nice flavor. I'll often be able to pick out a flavor that's like a fruit candy flavor. Sometimes it's like maybe watermelon flavor, but just sort of generic Jolly Rancher candy flavors for those of you who live in the States. Most people know what that is. This is one of the great American apples. There's people who would claim that this is the greatest American apple. People were importing this apple from America to England on wooden sailing ships. They wanted this apple that much. So it's an outstanding keeping apple, and it's survived on numerous merits. And it's worth trying to grow if you have an apple orchard or a franken tree or anything like that. Now, I grew up eating this out of stores. If you're maybe 10 years or more younger than me, you would remember the earliest store apples you probably remember would be Golden Delicious, Red Delicious, and Granny Smith. Well, before that, it was Golden Delicious, Red Delicious, and Newton Pippin. That was, the equivalent. And like Granny Smith, it was always picked really early, green. It was picked and sold dead green, before it should even be picked for long storage for the best quality eating. So, while quite a few people, especially from my generation and a little bit earlier, have had lots of Newton Pippins, often they're just called Pippins. They would have been very green and very tart, like to the point. I remember eating them. I liked them. I actually liked them. And if you said, which apple do you want, I would get that one. It was probably largely because of the texture. And, I was used to the yellow and red apples being like mushy and nasty. So I would eat them. And if my mom was like, oh, what apple do you want? I would get a Newton Pippin. I would eat it, and I would get a stomach ache. Like, it would actually make my stomach cramp a little bit, which I just kind of ignored. I didn't really mind, but that's because it was completely green. They're just harvested completely green. So most people have never had a ripe Granny Smith or Newton Pippin, and the thing is, they're both flavorful, unique, good apples. It's just that that's not the way the industry treats them at all. They pick them way too early, and then they sell them unripe, and you cannot get a ripe one. Like, you'd be really lucky to find a ripe one. I really haven't had any luck growing Granny Smith. I have like a couple of grafts on the tree, and it just hasn't done that well for me. But the people I know who grow it around here, they will eat it in the winter time, when it's hung on the tree for a while and gotten very ripe. This is what made the Granny Smith, famous in the first place. It wasn't picking it when it's super green and selling it as a green apple just for cooking. Okay, here's Rhode Island Greening. Again, this could be a cooking storage apple. I really don't know a lot about it. It's a fairly famous apple. It's really more of a cooking apple. It's not bad to eat. I haven't used this enough to really know how to use it well. And I don't get to cook a lot with apples, so I don't know much to say about it. It's a very famous American apple, though, widely grown at one time. Okay, this is a little crab apple that I got from my friend Becca. Thank you, Becca Monroe. And she knew I was interested in apples, and she had certain trees that she would go around to and pick fruit from in, say, like North Carolina on the East Coast, and she sent me some scions. This was one of them, and now when she sent it, she said it was a red-fleshed crab. And I don't know what happened, if she got the wrong tree or whatever, but this is not. It's more like a yellow-fleshed crab. As you can see, it looks like a cherry. It's a primitive apple. It is definitely has some bitterness to it, like that wild puckery bitterness. It's not like a low sugar apple. It's not like it's just this sour, bitter, inedible thing at all. But it does have a, you know, it has some cojones. It's really cool. It'll grow in clusters bigger than this, just like clusters of cherries. Such a cool little apple. I'm skeptical that this is ripe as well. I think of it more as maybe closer to December, but we're just going to eat it anyway. So I always eat this seeds and all. And yeah, this is definitely not ripe. It's very tannic, very puckery. Like it's kind of uncomfortably astringent and puckery. Minimum another 2 weeks on the tree before it's going to be really good. And yeah, again, I just keep them on the table like this and just eat the whole thing, seeds and all. And the puckery. The seeds have cyanic, like cyanic acid, cyanide, natural cyanide compounds, which tastes a little bit like cherries or almonds. So that just makes it more like a cherry if you just eat the whole seeds and chew them up with the rest of it. Anyway, I think that apple, I would actually like to have a tree of those apples at their best. I really enjoy eating them out of hand. They're definitely not ripe yet. But I'm more interested in using it for breeding and mixing other stuff into it. I tried to cross-pollinate it this year with some interesting apples, but none of the pollinations took for whatever reason. So no go on that. Who knows, maybe I'll try it again some other year. It would be a long project to turn that into something really exceptional, I think, but I just feel like it has potential. Okay, there you go. A few interesting apples, and that's probably about the last apple tasting video I'm going to do until next apple season. I'm way up here in Frankentree pollinating some apples. This is what I call BECCA'S crab. My friend Becca sent it to me. It is a very small crab with yellow flesh. It's juicy, it's tasty, and it looks like a cherry. It is a little bit bitter still, not sour, but kind of tannic, you know, kind of puckery. And my idea is to breed, I'm starting to work towards a red-fleshed crab that looks and hangs like a cherry with cherry flavors. So I'm mixing it with cherry cocks and sweet 16 for the cherry flavors, maple and grenadine for red flavors and like red flesh and berry flavors, trailman for good just general crab genes, and Wixen for good, you know, crab genes. This is a long-term project. I don't even know if it's possible. It's probably not going to happen in my lifetime, and it would require multiple crossing and back crossing and recrossing.